Hi, welcome to the lecture on environmental adaptation of animals, and now we will for the last time focus on the skeletal muscle. So what happens if we go on the gym or just lay on the sofa? And on a layman level, we would think that, okay, these are the two sides of the same coin. So they are completely opposite. So when using the skeletal muscle or not using. But actually, the mechanisms are a little bit different. So first of all, when we are going on the gym or skiing or whatever is the exercise, actually there is as much muscle cells in your body as before. So you are not growing new muscle cells at all. But then, if you are not using the muscle for a long time, it can reduce the number of cells. So then these cells will be cut in small pieces and circulated to other purpose. And then how your muscles are growing, it's because of the hypertrophy. So these cells become larger. So diameter is larger, then you can have more actin and myosin and these contracting elements there. And then, if you're not using the cells, then you are actually recycling also these contracting proteins. And this hypertrophy can be seen quite well in microscope slides when you have some small injuries in the skeletal muscle, and then there is the regeneration. So you can see that these cells on the left hand side, they are much larger than these on the right hand side. And the only difference is that in the right hand side there has been some rapamycin that is blocking the mTOR signaling pathway. So that means that, okay, you have some kind of cell signaling to have this hypertrophy in these muscle cells. And how it works? Well, it will start from insulin or insulin-like growth factor, and they are binding on the receptor and affecting on a cell signaling pathway. And one key element of the cell signaling pathways is this IKT1. So it will be phosphorylated, it will be active and regulate on two things. First of all, it will directly affect, or actually indirectly affect, on the protein synthesis, so you can have more contracting elements. But on the other hand, it will also affect on the gene expression of some atrophy genes. And this IKT is also regulated not only with insulin, but also the testosterone, also by the follistatin is inducing this IKT. And the IKT, how it's regulates the protein synthesis, it's affecting with this mTOR that we had in the previous slide. And this the mTOR is the key element. So even when you are using the muscles with heavy load, so there's mechanical overload, that will directly affect that, okay, there is more protein synthesis in these cells because it's affecting on the mTOR. And okay, you have more protein synthesis. What you need, you need more amino acids in the cell. And how you can make more proteins, you need more gene activity. And how you can do that in a very long skeletal muscle, we have these satellite cells that are kind of stem cells, and they can be dividing, and you can use the nucleus of a satellite cell, so it will merge your large skeletal muscle fiber. So then you have, previously you had 100 nucleus, now you have 101 nucleus, because one nucleus was taken from these satellite cells. Okay, but then when you are having the atrophy, so the IKT1 is not working, then there is transcription of these atrophy genes, there is less protein synthase, more protein degradation, and how this protein degradation is done, it's done with the ubiquitin protease and autophagy lysosome pathways. And there are few other steps also. So this atrophy is quite complex also. And one of the things that you can see how it's so complex is that it's also affecting differently on different kind of skeletal muscle fibers. So the atrophy is happening on these glycolytic fibers, 2A and 2X, and at the same time there can be hypertrophy of these slow oxidative fibers, so fiber number 1. So there's a switch from glycolytic cells to oxidative cells. So these muscle fibers are not all the time the same. And for that reason, we have actually 2 different kind of exercise. So that affects on will the cells grow or not. We have weightlifting. So when we need as much power from the skeletal muscle as possible at once. So it's a resistance exercise, especially when doing with heavy loads. But then on the opposite side, we have, for example, long distance running, bicycling, etc. So it's endurance exercise. In bicycling, you are having as minimal resistance as possible to move your legs as fast as possible. And then you are not using so much power, but you can have more velocity. And these 2 different kind of exercises, we are using different kind of fibers. So in this, when you need more power, you need glycolytic fibers, because in these glycolytic fibers you can upregulate the glycolysis quite easily. So you can get maximum, but you can get it only for short time. But then in these endurance exercises, we are using these low oxidative fibers. So we are not getting as much power as possible with the glycolytic fibers, but we are going to get it for a long time. And therefore, the modulation of these different fibers in these different exercises is different. So in the glycolytic fibers, we can increase the contracting elements. So the cell is becoming larger, so there are more contracting elements. But then in these endurance exercises, what we need for these oxidative fibers, we need more mitochondria. So for that reason, we then need, if we have oxygen available, we can get more ATP. Because this mitochondria mediated energy production, it's always working as fast as possible. So there's no it's the only way to regulate, increase the ATP production is just to have more mitochondria, larger mitochondria, etc. And when we are having in this resistance exercise larger cells, of course we can have then more another nuclei there with the satellite cells. But if we have a larger cell and there is a blood vessel, if the cell is very large, then the oxygen is very difficult to deliver the oxygen with the diffusion in a very large cell. So that's why in these endurance exercises, no hypertrophy. Because otherwise it would be hypoxic. Okay, what happens? How you can get as much power from the muscle as possible? If we have a larger cross section, so larger cell, then of course we can have more contracting elements, and then we can get the more force. And then if we are having, for example, more mitochondria, then we can get more ATP for these cells, and then if we are decreasing the ATP fast with the myosin, then there will be very fast contraction. And so the largest cross section can be, well, if we have very large cell, then we have the hypertrophy in the muscle fiber, and then we have as much force as possible. But at the same time, when we are having minimal or zero load, so there is no load at all, then the velocity will be the highest. And the power of the muscle depends on both. So both force and velocity. And we can see that the power maximum is over there. So it's about 1/3 of the force, 1/3 of the velocity also. And so that's why by using the maximal weight is not the most effective. Okay, how this training affects on different kind of skeletal muscles. We have in the control situation, we have these slow oxidative fibers about 50%. Every other muscle fiber is on type 1. And when we are training, for example in these females, it's still about 50%. But there is a shift from 2X to 2A. As well as also on the males. So it's not on the sex hormones, it's on the modulating of the muscles with the exercise. So these glycolytic fibers turn to oxidative glycolytic fibers. So that means that, okay, you are using less glycolysis for the ATP production, but more oxygen. And this then, for that reason, you need more capillaries. So in these glycolytic fibers, there's about 2 capillary per a single skeletal muscle cell. And in these oxidative, there might be 4 or 6. So there's more oxygen available for these cells. And it's the same thing happens in both sex. So the angiogenesis is increasing the capillaries around the muscle fibers. And we can see that it also increases on these type 2X muscle fibers. So it doesn't so much know that, okay, what kind of muscle we have here, but it's increasing capillaries all around the muscle. Okay, how we can control this capillary formation is by the angiogenesis, so formation of capillaries. And for that we need vascular endothelial growth factor. Very long name, so that's why we GF is much used. And it can be tested quite nicely. So, 30-minute exercise with a left knee extension. So there is some load, and then you are just moving your leg for 30 minutes. Quite boring. But the good point is that if you have the right leg, because this happens only on the left, and then you have right leg that is not moving, then you are taking the samples from both legs. So then you can see that what happens in this leg that has been doing the exercise and in the resting leg. And interesting is that this angiogenesis happens in both legs. So in this left leg, it's way more from the rest. But in the right, it's even larger increase. And that means that if you are going on the gym, that okay, I want to improve my left extensor in the leg, in the legs, it's completely impossible to work with only with one muscle, because the angiogenesis is affecting on also other muscles, and it can be even inducing more capillaries in those muscles that you are now on the rest. Okay, then on the energy metabolism. So when we have more oxygen, of course, then we can make more energy in these muscle cells. And for that reason, we are increasing the mitochondria. So we have larger and more mitochondria in the skeletal muscles. And that's why the total volume will increase from, for example, 4 to 6%. It's still very small amount of the total volume, but because so huge amount of the volume is needed for the contraction, so it's actually 40% increase. But at the same time, there is also about 2 times more lipid droplets in the skeletal muscles. And that's quite confusing. So now you have just some muscles filled with lipids. Why? Well, because the mitochondria can use several fuels, so not only glycolysis, but these new mitochondria are using more lipids. And because from the glucose, it's quite easily to produce lactate. From the lipids, no lactate, only carbon dioxide. But it needs that you need the oxygen for the degradation of these lipids. Okay, how we can have these kind of changes in the skeletal muscle? For that reason, we use a transcription activator PGC1 alpha. Quite long and difficult name. But it's doing all. So it's affecting on angiogenesis. So you have more blood flow. Then it's the muscle type change. So from the glycolytic to oxidative glycolytic cells, etc. And then more mitochondria. So you have all the change with the same transcription activator. How it done? First of all, when you are having exercise, you are modulating your excitation contraction coupling. You have more calcium released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum to make the cell contract. At the same time, when you are making the cell contract, then you are using more ATP. And of course, when you are using more ATP, you need more glycolytic ATP production. And therefore, you will have more lactate, for example. And as a byproduct with this, we will have more metabolites, we will have more free radicals, we have more different kind of ions in these cells, and they are then affecting on cell signaling, that is affecting on the nucleus to have this PGC1 alpha activated, and that will induce all these things. And one of the things is that, okay, it's affecting on mitochondrial protein synthesis, from which it's easy to understand that, okay, now you have more new mitochondria that are then easier to help use the lipids to produce ATP. And so it's when we are using the cells, we are affecting on cell signaling and affecting on the transcription activator, and then getting new mitochondria there. But what about then? We have two different training types. So in endurance and resistance exercise, we are using a little bit different transcription activator. So when doing the exercise with the bicycle, we are affecting on the PGC1 alpha 1. And in the resistance exercises, the last number is different. So it's a little bit different transcription activator. And in these endurance exercises, that's affecting on the oxidative ATP production. But in this resistance exercise, it will boost the muscle growth. Okay. Is it just that, okay, if you want now have as large muscle as possible, you will have the heaviest load on the gym and just pump it? Well, actually, the training combination can be more effective if you want to win the gold medal in some competition when you want to run as fast as possible. First of all, over here we can see that, okay, again, 50% is on MHC1, so these slow oxidative fibers, maybe 10% on this fast glycolytic, and with working with the heavy loads, it might be that it's not the best performance. So when we are having the resistance training, it will modulate. So modulate from the fast glycolytic to these oxidative glycolytic cells. And so to have a little bit different myosin heavy chain. But then quite often these athletic persons, they know that, okay, before the large competition, they will a little bit cool down. So there is a post the training season when you are not using as heavy loads as possible, because that will do the opposite. From the these oxidative glycolytic fibers to fast glycolytic fibers, but now these are almost 20%. So that can cause that now you can have fast short distance performance, like running 100 meters. You can improve the time at least by a few percent. But also it works on the endurance training. So that's been tested with the athletic bicyclers, that, okay, even they can have benefits from the resistance training. So it's not only that okay, you should have as low weight as possible. So the mixture seems to be that it's the best solution. Okay, this hypertrophy and the modulation is not limited to skeletal muscle. It's also happening on the heart. And this is one cool example of it. So the python, the ventricular mass is increased after the digestion. And of course that means that okay, then you have larger heart, and in the heart you have more this myosin heavy chain. So these genes are upregulated about 2 times, twofold, and so you have much more contracting elements. But at the same time, you can see that the DNA is lowered. So that means that there is not a single cell more in the heart, but these cells become larger. So that's why it's the hypertrophy. And the same thing also can be seen in practically all winter active ectoderms, like trout. So you want to have the same body functions in summer and winter time, although you have colder body temperature, then you are having the hypertrophy. It's maybe 20% larger heart in the trout in the winter time, and also the cardiac muscles are also larger. But also it affects that okay in humans. In the endurance training, we have larger hearts, and during the pregnancy. And these are reversible effects. So after giving the birth, then the heart size will get smaller. Also, when you are not training all the time, then it's also affecting. But these are needing, okay, what you need, while you are having the hypertrophy, you need more oxygen. That means that you need more circulation. Thank you.